If Ned Stark had not been an honest man, the very foundations of Westeros might have shifted long before the War of the Five Kings erupted. Instead of arriving in King's Landing with rigid honor guiding every decision, he would have entered the capital with a colder, sharper awareness of how power truly worked. Rather than trusting the word of courtiers and the fragile authority of the crown, he might have quietly gathered leverage, secrets, and alliances. His investigation into the royal lineage would not have been a moral burden, but a weapon, one he could choose to reveal or conceal depending on what served his survival. In this version of events, Ned would have recognized immediately that truth alone has no power without timing. Discovering the secret of Joffrey's parentage would not have driven him to confront the Queen directly. Instead, he might have approached figures like Littlefinger or Varys with calculated caution, offering pieces of information to test their loyalties while keeping the full truth hidden. By playing the game instead of rejecting it, he could have transformed from a pawn into a dangerous, unpredictable player whose intentions no one could fully read. His relationship with Robert Baratheon would also take on a more strategic tone. Rather than acting purely as a loyal friend, Ned might have subtly influenced the king's decisions, steering him away from self-destruction while ensuring his own position remained secure. He could have used Robert's trust as a shield, quietly undermining enemies while appearing steadfast and honorable on the surface. This duality would allow him to operate in both worlds, maintaining his image while embracing necessary deception. Cersei Lannister, accustomed to dealing with either fools or open enemies, would find herself unsettled by a Ned Stark who did not act predictably. Instead of receiving a warning about her children, she might sense that Ned knew something but could not determine how much. This uncertainty would weaken her position, forcing her into defensive maneuvers rather than aggressive ones. In a court driven by perception, doubt can be more powerful than accusation, and Ned could exploit that to keep her off balance. The question of succession would become a game of timing and leverage rather than a moral dilemma. Ned might choose to delay revealing the truth until he had secured the loyalty of key houses or even the City Watch. With the right support, he could present the revelation not as a desperate claim, but as an undeniable shift in power. Instead of being arrested, he might orchestrate a controlled transition, ensuring that any move against him would trigger consequences for his enemies. Littlefinger, always drawn to chaos, would likely find Ned far more interesting in this scenario. Rather than betraying him outright, he might attempt to align himself with this more pragmatic Stark, seeing potential for greater instability and opportunity. Their relationship could become a dangerous partnership built on mutual manipulation, each man aware that the other could turn at any moment. Such a dynamic would add layers of tension that never existed when Ned remained purely honorable. Sansa and Arya would also be shaped differently by a father who understood deception. Instead of teaching them only ideals, he might prepare them for the harsh realities of the world they inhabit. Sansa could learn to navigate court politics with awareness rather than naivety, while Arya might refine her instincts into calculated survival skills. The Stark children would grow not just as victims of the game, but as potential players within it. When Robert eventually died, Ned would not be caught unprepared. Rather than relying on written decrees and fragile promises, he would already have contingency plans in place. Control of the City Watch, alliances with key lords, and carefully placed information could allow him to seize the moment decisively. The transition of power might still be contested, but Ned would no longer be at the mercy of those who thrived on betrayal. Even if conflict became inevitable, Ned's survival would drastically alter the course of the war. A living Stark patriarch, skilled in both honor and deception, would unify the North more effectively and perhaps even prevent some of the fragmentation that followed. His presence alone could deter opportunistic moves from rival houses, reshaping the alliances that defined the conflict. Ultimately, a dishonest Ned Stark would not necessarily become a villain, but he would embody a different kind of strength, one rooted in adaptability rather than rigid principle. His story would explore whether it is possible to retain one's core identity while embracing the compromises required to survive. In a world like Westeros, that balance might be the difference between death and lasting influence. Yet this transformation would not come without consequences, especially for Ned himself. Honesty is not merely a trait he possesses. It defines his identity and shapes how others perceive him. If he were to abandon that foundation, even partially, he would face an internal conflict far more complex than any political struggle. Every calculated lie would chip away at the certainty that once guided him, forcing him to question whether survival justifies the loss of self. His relationships would inevitably change, beginning with his family. Catelyn Stark, who values both honor and loyalty, might struggle to reconcile this new version of her husband with the man she married. While she could appreciate the necessity of caution, she might sense the growing distance between them as Ned becomes more guarded and less transparent. Trust, once absolute, would become something negotiated rather than assumed. For his children, the shift would be even more profound. They would no longer see their father as an unshakable moral compass, but as a man capable of compromise and secrecy. This could make them stronger in some ways, better prepared for the dangers of their world, but it would also rob them of the clarity that once defined House Stark. The lessons they learn would be more ambiguous, shaped by survival rather than principle. In King's Landing, Ned's reputation would evolve into something less certain and therefore more dangerous. Allies might respect his newfound pragmatism, but they would also trust him less, unsure of where he truly stands. Enemies, meanwhile, would approach him with greater caution, recognizing that he is no longer predictable. This ambiguity could grant him power, but it would also isolate him, leaving him without the unwavering loyalty that his honesty once inspired. The moral weight of his decisions would grow heavier over time. Each lie, each manipulation, would carry consequences that extend beyond immediate survival. Ned would have to confront the ripple effects of his actions, from the lives affected by his schemes to the broader instability they might create. Unlike those who thrive on deceit, he would not find it easy to dismiss these consequences, making every choice a burden. There is also the risk that, in learning to play the game, Ned becomes entangled in it. Deception has a way of escalating, requiring more lies to sustain earlier ones. What begins as a strategic choice could evolve into a pattern that is difficult to break. Ned might find himself making decisions that he once would have condemned, gradually drifting further from the man he used to be. His interactions with figures like Varys would highlight this tension. Varys, who claims to serve the realm above all else, might see potential in a more flexible Ned Stark. Their conversations could become philosophical debates about the nature of power and morality, with Ned forced to defend choices that blur the line between right and necessary. These exchanges would challenge his beliefs, pushing him to redefine what honor means in a world that rarely rewards it. Even victories would feel different under these circumstances. Success achieved through deception lacks the clarity of triumph earned through integrity. Ned might secure his position, protect his family, and even stabilize the realm, but he would carry the knowledge of how those outcomes were achieved. This awareness could create a lingering sense of unease, a recognition that survival came at a cost that cannot be easily measured. In the long term, the legacy of House Stark would be altered. Instead of being remembered as unwaveringly honorable, they might become known for a more balanced approach to power, respected but less idealized. This shift could influence how future generations interpret their responsibilities, shaping the identity of the North in subtle but lasting ways. Ultimately, imagining a dishonest Ned Stark is not just about changing events, but about exploring the fragile relationship between identity and survival. It raises the question of whether one can adapt to a ruthless world without becoming part of it. In trying to save himself and those he loves, Ned might succeed, but the man who achieves that success could be very different from the one who first rode south.